If everybody could just do one exercise, this would be it. This is the calf stretch. The calf stretch is an exercise that loosens up your walking muscles. Muscles that, if they're tight, completely change your gait pattern from one that's beneficial to your alignment as opposed to one that's not. It's a very simple exercise. All you need is a half dome, or if you don't have a half dome, you can fold and roll a towel, and it works almost just as well. You can go ahead and put the ball of your foot up onto the dome or towel and drop your heel all the way to the ground. It's very important that you keep that back heel grounded to the floor. Now, you're going to try to step forward. Let me show you what would be ideal, and that would be to bring your opposite foot all the way forward. You should be able to do this, but most people aren't. So instead, you're going to take smaller steps, and you're going to see what the tension looks like down the back of that leg. Now, whatever your body does when you step forward, that's what it's doing while you're walking. So it's very revealing to see the patterns that you may have that you didn't even know about. What you want to try to do is, once your foot moves forward, you want to practice aligning the rest of your body, which means you want to pull your shoulders back plumb or vertical over your hips, and then see if you can pull your head back as well. Now, you might not have very much balance when you're in upright position, which is why you're slowly starting to lean forward. Once you restore the function, which means restore the length down to the lower leg, you can now have a less aging or less shuffling posture, and you can start working your body up backwards towards where it used to be. Let's go and try the other side. I'm going to step off the back, put the ball of the opposite foot up, and again, drop your heel. Try to take a step forward. It doesn't have to be a big step. It can be wherever you feel comfortable, but know where you're trying to get to is a regular stride length while you're walking. Now, if you've got a short stride length, you're obviously not walking around taking little steps, but what you're doing is you're overusing the hip to compensate for how tight the back of this leg is. And you can feel how tight it is right now as you're doing the stretch. But slowly over time, you want to move your opposite foot forward, and you want to make sure that you're standing upright, that your hips aren't twisting. You want to keep everything very square to the direction you're facing. See if you can let your arms relax, and again, stack your torso. Good, you can go and come on off. Like I said, this exercise is the foundation of this entire exercise program. You can't do this exercise too much, but if you do it with regularity, you will notice a significant increase in energy and circulation throughout the body, which means a significant decrease in pain and injury. Good luck. For this exercise, all you need is a chair or stool from your home and one of these. These are a half dome, or you can also use a folded roll towel. It works just as well. The double calf stretch is an exercise that's about restoring the function to the feet, the knees, the hips, and the low back. It's a really great way to test your spinal mobility and to see how much movement you have in your hip joints. So start with your body right in front of your chair. You want to make sure that your feet are about pelvis width apart, and you want to make sure that the outside edges of your feet are pointing straight ahead. Go ahead and bend forward and let your palms rest on a chair. Now, ideally, when you're bending forward, your spine should drop down towards the floor comfortably so that your back is concave, just like this. If you bend forward and your spine stays rounded or convex, it means that the muscles down the backs of the legs are so tight that they're not allowing your spine to relax back into this position. So what you're going to do is you're going to work on letting the spine relax and lifting your tailbone up towards the ceiling to get a pretty good stretch back here. You want to make sure that you're not moving towards the chair, but instead back your weight up towards your heels. You've got muscles back there to hold you. If you always move forward, they never get a chance to work. So see if you can settle back so that you can lift all your toes. All your weight's back here on your hips. And you're just going to keep letting the spine drop and let the tailbone lift. You can also relax the back of the neck. After you've held this for about 60 seconds, we need to make it a little bit more challenging, because if your spine is up and rounded like this, we need to get those muscles stretched as fast as we can. So now we're going to use your half dome or your towel. Go ahead and set it down in front of your chair. And when you get up on it, you're going to go ahead and put the ball of your foot up and make sure that your heel drops all the way to the ground. You can lean forward if you're feeling a little wobbly, and then step up with your other foot, so now you have 2 feet up on top of the towel or dome, but both heels on the ground. Go ahead and put your palms back down onto your chair, and you're going to try to back up like you did on the first one. Once you're backed up, again, your toes should be liftable. See if you can drop your spine down into that space and lift your tailbone up towards the ceiling. We're going to work on holding this for up to 60 seconds, and you want to make sure that you're not bending your arms to come down. So keep your arms very straight and let the back of the neck relax. Now, it's perfectly normal to have a lot of stretch back in the calves, even though you're changing the position of your spine. So that lets you know that the tension in the back of your legs really does affect the health of your spine, because you can feel it right now. Just gonna hold this just a little bit longer. See if you can relax the back of your neck. Take a couple more deep breaths. And then when it's time to come out, just go ahead and step off with one foot, and you can walk yourself back up and step off the back. This exercise, even though it's called the double calf stretch, affects the health of the spine, your pelvic floor, your hip joints, your knees, even the muscles inside the feet, like plantar fasciitis. It's a very simple solution. You can do it as often as possible, but you should try to do it for at least 60 seconds 3 times a day, whether you do it all at once or maybe once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and then once again in the evening. Good luck. When you walk, it's very important that you have a particular motor skill called pelvic lifting. It's the strength in your hip enough to lift your pelvis up so that your foot can clear the floor. If you can't clear the floor when you walk, you have to end up bending the knee and the hip, which is that knee flexion and hip flexion we were talking about in Physics 101. This is not the way you're designed to walk, so you tend to overuse these areas of the body and can create inflammation or osteoarthritis in those areas. So this is a basic exercise that's designed to help you strengthen that muscle, or maybe even show you that you had one. You're going to start by lining up the outside edges of the feet. You're going to put all of your weight onto the right leg and go ahead and press your right hip down into the floor, letting your left foot come up off the ground. Now, there's a lot of balance on this exercise, so if you'd like, you can hold onto a chair or a wall when you first start. You don't need to practice the balance at the same time. We're just working on the skill and the strength of the hip. It's also important that you don't bend your knee. This is no knee bending during this exercise, so you have to keep both legs straight, which really makes you use your standing leg that much more in order to get the foot up off the ground. So keep checking yourself and make sure that you're not bending your knees or that you're not leaning forward, but instead pulling yourself back onto your heels. You should be able to lift the toes of your standing leg. Let's try the other side. All of your weight's on your left leg. You can put your left hand on your hip if it helps, or you can hold onto a chair. But push your left hip down towards the floor, and it creates a lever system or a pulley that lifts the right one up and off. No bending knees. It's easy to get the leg off the ground this way, but these are the joints that we're overusing. So instead, you keep both legs straight and then go ahead and press your left hip down. You should feel the work in the left hip or even the left glutes. If you feel it in your left knee, it's probably because you're leaning too far forward. So instead, just back yourself up and get yourself where you're all the way stacked in your heel. Hold it just a little bit longer. You can practice this one anywhere when you're out walking around. If you're waiting in line somewhere, you can wait in line on one foot. Okay, go ahead and come out. Now that's the most basic version, and it's the safest version for people who've had hip replacements. So if you've had a hip replacement, stick with this version on the floor. But if you haven't had a hip replacement, you can actually increase the challenge by adding a block, or if you'd like, a phone book at home works just as well. You're going to step up onto your block. You want to make sure that your heel is completely on the block and not hanging off the back. So make sure that you've got about 1/8 of an inch of phone book or block behind you. Again, you can always use the chair on this one, but work on straightening your standing leg. Try not to let anything be bending here, and move your weight back so that you're almost all entirely in your heel. You're going to go ahead and you're going to push your right foot down and see if you can get your left foot up above your right foot. You've got balance, you've got strength, and you've got a whole new appreciation for the muscles in your hips. Now, this is just half of the list. There's actually a second half in which you lower the foot towards the floor. Now, I didn't bend this knee to get down there. I kept this leg straight. So I'm just doing this lifting and lowering using the muscles of this hip only. There's no front of the leg, there's no back of the leg, there's no waist or spine being used here. I'm not thinking of pulling my hip up, I'm thinking of pushing my hip down. Let's do one more of those and we'll try the other side. Same thing, you're gonna come up, make sure that your heel has about 1/8 of an inch of phone book or block behind it, and very carefully step up. You can still keep your other toes on the ground until you feel comfortable, and again, you can always use a counter or a wall to hold on to. Try to bring your body upright and see if you can just pick your foot up off the floor. This is really great for hip bone density and balance. You want to be careful of the bending of the knees, so keep both legs very straight and keep your weight back in your heel. And then see if you can push your left hip down and pull your right foot up away from the floor. This is half of it. You can also work on the lowering. And eventually, your hips get looser and looser, and this hip joint gets healthier and healthier, as does the muscles behind you. So it's great for sacral stabilization, pelvic health. You can pack a lot into just one little exercise. Let's do one more of those, and then go ahead and come on off. Whether you did it on the floor or you did it on the block, this exercise is very simple to do. You can do it for a minute or for 10 to 12 times before you switch between legs, or anytime you're walking. If you're out on a curb, you can try it on a curb. The key is to practice it often so that you put this motor skill into your regular gait pattern. It's not really about the exercise. It's about changing the way you move through your everyday life. A lot of the functions in this area of the body are trying to create downward movement, from your waist products to the circulation getting down towards your feet. And we have a habit of sucking our stomachs in, only we're not really sucking our stomachs in, but rather we're sucking our stomachs up. That action of pulling your stomach in all the time actually creates an opposing force to the downward action. So if things are trying to move down and you're constantly pulling things back up, you can actually create a standstill in this area of the body, which is not good for the functions. So we're gonna work on letting this stomach muscles relax. And it's not really the stomach muscles that you think. They're not the muscles that stabilize the spine. They're the deeper muscles of the psoas, and they're inside, kind of against your organs. So when they're very tense, they can really create lots of problems through your digestive system and through the blood flow to your hips, etc. So we're gonna go ahead and come on down to our hands and knees, because we're gonna practice relaxing against gravity. So just get yourself into a quadruped or a hands and knees position. And when you first get into it, you might wanna notice, are you already not relaxed from the get-go? Because really your spine should just drop down with gravity. So give yourself just a couple minutes to get from this position into this position. You want to let your belly button drop down towards the ground. You want to let your ribs drop down towards the ground. And then eventually you want your head to drop down towards the ground so that you stretch the back of your neck. Now you're going to take a few deep breaths here. And what you're going to try to do is let your belly relax down towards the floor. And as you do that, it's going to feel like you're really getting droopy across the midsection, but it's okay. It's healthy for those tissues to soften. You want to make sure that you can relax your belly button at will. And as you do so, the weight of your organs will drop towards the floor, which is fine because it gives these muscles a nice stretch. It takes usually a couple minutes, but eventually you'll get it and you'll feel a big release happen right around the belly button. keep breathing, and notice a lot of times it will come back up without you even knowing. So you want to go back to relaxing, letting the tailbone lift, letting the head drop, and letting the stomach drop towards the ground. That was good. Now, we did this on your hands and knees because it's easier to feel when gravity's pulling, but you can actually do it while you're standing. And if you're having problems with digestion, you might want to check to how often you're actually pushing the food back up into your colon by doing something that you think is good for yourself, which is holding in your stomach. So at the end of every meal, make sure you really relax your belly and don't interfere with your body's natural processes. One of the most basic ways to test your core strength is to see how well you can keep your knees together while you're holding an object. I'm going to use a block for this exercise, but you can use a block or a pillow, even a pencil works fine. The key is to keep your knees constantly pressing together so that the object doesn't fall through. If it does, you know that you were unable to continuously keep these muscles activated. Go ahead and recline on your back, or if you don't want to lay on the floor, you can use a couch or your bed. And get your feet about pelvis width apart. Make sure that your back's comfortable. Don't let your feet be too far away or too close together. And put your object, whatever it is, together between your knees. And you're going to work on continuously squeezing your knees together. Now, the motion's fairly invisible, but you should have a lot of sensation coming from your inner thigh. A common mistake people make is, instead of using their inner thighs, they tuck their tailbones under. So what I want you to do is put your hands underneath your low back and make sure that you can roll your pelvis forward enough to get your fingers underneath. That way you know your pelvis is in neutral. When your pelvis is in this neutral position, it activates your inner thighs as much as possible. So see if you can keep your knees squeezing your object as tightly as possible without squeezing your glutes. If you can't tell if you're squeezing your glutes or not, go ahead and tighten everything, and if you felt your pelvis tip backwards, you know that you did. So see if you can relax that and continue to squeeze the knees together. Now you can just work on this. Just keeping your knees together is a great way to increase strength in through the inner thigh, the adductors, and through the lower abdominals. But to test and see how far our strength has gotten away from us, you're going to pick your knees up off the ground. And as you do that, you want to make sure that your feet don't come together. If your feet come together, you don't have enough strength in your lower abdominals to do this work. So you're going to try to pull your feet as far as away from each other as possible and continue to squeeze your block. It's very common as you pull your ankles away to lose this tension here. So I want you to really, even if you have to use your hands, keep continuous squeezing here. You should really feel a lot of noise coming down from the groin. And you can work this as you lift your feet up off the ground and let them come back down. You can keep and check this continuous squeezing through your inner thigh. You can do this as often as you like. It's not really about lowering and lifting your legs as much as it is about keeping continuous squeezing through your knees and not letting your feet come together. This basic exercise of squeezing your knees together, you can actually do this exercise while you're working or sitting in any chair. While you're typing at your desk, just put a pencil or even a piece of paper between your knees, and you'll actually keep your stomach and your inner thighs engaged throughout your entire day. I call this exercise legs on the wall. Now it's very challenging, but it's very effective. Remember that you can come out of it whenever you need to, and you can always get back into it whenever you feel better. You're gonna start with your hips away from a wall. Now the wall doesn't have to be much higher than this, but it really depends on your range of motion. You wanna get your hips about anywhere from 8 to 12 inches away from the wall, and then you're gonna turn your body, and as you recline back, you're gonna get your heels out until your legs are as wide as they can go. Now, if you have a hip replacement, you're not gonna do this exercise. But what you want to work on is your pelvis. You want to avoid your pelvis tipping back towards the floor and instead roll your hips forward until your tailbone drops down. Now your feet, you want to turn them down towards the floor until you get your pinky toe closer to the wall, as opposed to pointing your feet up towards the ceiling. So let your thighs not only drop open, but you're going to also let them roll open. Now all you have to do is lay here. And as you're down on the ground, gravity is pushing your legs open, and it's a really great stretch for the adductors. They're the muscles on the inner part of the thigh, and they run all the way from the groin to the inside of the knee. So when they're tight, they can really interfere with the health of the knee and in this area, your hips and your groin. So you just want to relax. Now keep in mind, whenever you feel the stretch is getting overwhelming, just bend your knees and take a break this way. But if you can come back up into it, try to do that as soon as you can. And you want to relax your abdomen. Make sure you're not tensing your belly or squeezing your glutes. You're just trying to relax as much as possible, which can be kind of difficult when you have a lot of sensation coming from this area of the body, which will happen the first few times you do it. Go ahead and come all the way down. Bring your knees into your chest and then just roll off to your side in order to come out of it. Now you want to work up to holding this exercise for about 4 to 5 minutes. Like I said, it's challenging, but when you do it with regularity, it can do amazing things for your groin, your knees, and your feet.